More than 200 years ago, Americans fought a revolution against big government.
He has erected a multitude of new offices and has sent hither swarms of officials to harass our people and eat out their substance.
George III and his bureaucrats taxed and controlled their lives until the people said, enough. The government in Washington, D.C. makes you nostalgic for old King George. The royal tax collectors took about 25% from our ancestors. This year, government at all levels will extract 50% of our money to waste. And not gently. IRS agents use wiretaps, mail openings, informants, disguises, guns, chains, and jails to get every last dime. Meanwhile, at the Federal Reserve, 12 faceless bureaucrats decide your economic future in secret. How much the Federal Reserve, 12 faceless bureaucrats decide your economic future in secret. How much inflation should there be next year? What should interest rates be? How much of your savings should be transferred to politicians and their favored big banks? The Supreme Court, where individual rights are supposed to be protected, think it's fine if government invades our financial privacy, spies on us in our bedrooms, regulates church schools, and restricts our free speech. Meanwhile, at the Congress, everything is up for grabs. Everything is up for grabs, as long as it's yours.
Welcome to On Second Thought. I am William Wagener, the guy in the white hat. Glad you could join us today. We're doing another show to bring you the truth. And I always ask the question, you know the question, have you lost control of your government? Well, apparently so. And I've got some disturbing information that's coming in from all over America. You ought to know about this information. But first, let me give you some good news. For all you non-custodial parents, especially you dads, you non-custodial dads know what family court is all about. The Massachusetts group called Children's Rights Council of Massachusetts and the Massachusetts Fathers and Family got successfully on the ballot a question called the Massachusetts Joint Physical Custody Ballot Question. And it won overwhelmingly, like 3-1 and 4-1 and 5-1 all over. It got 85% of the people voted yes for equal joint physical custody of children. The lopsided margin of victory was greater than that of any elected official in Massachusetts. Hello? It's time to stop this. We take the kids away from dad and make dad a visitor. Well, that's the good news. That's the result of the November election in Massachusetts. One of the worst states there is for destroying families. They just love to destroy families by saying dad's a bad guy because they're getting a divorce, and so he can only be a visitor once a month or not even that. So that's a really interesting and good news in the election. Also, good news in the election is down in Oceano. Vern Dahl appears to have won re-election, a libertarian who won re-election. He's the guy that stood up and got Cynthia Schaaf to speak down there and stop the fluoridation poisoning of the entire 5-city area just a year and a half ago. Well, he appears to have won re-election, though we don't have the certified votes yet. And Jim Hill, a libertarian in Oceano who was really angry, and you may remember Jim Hill ran for Congress as a libertarian I think it was 2 years ago, yeah. He just got elected, and he got the most votes in Oceano. So we have 2 libertarians on the Oceano new 5-member board of directors. 2 out of 5 are now libertarians running that board, and 2 incumbents went out the door. Thank you, voters of Oceano. Of course, they campaigned hard and really worked. They earned it. Now, the bad news. Some of you may have heard that there were riots and storming of GOP headquarters in several cities. My information tells me at least 16 different cities, and this is not probably the most recent information, there were near riots and damage done to GOP headquarters. You may have heard a little bit of that on talk radio, but what nobody told you is why. It makes it sound like the Democrats are just a bunch of crazy lunatics and all these anti-Bush bashing people are just nutcases. Well, here's the why, people. In Columbus, Ohio, one of the battleground states, in Precinct 1B, the information I have got but have not confirmed yet is there's something like 600 total voters in that precinct. And yet, they reported more than 4,000, I think, 600 votes for Bush, with only 600 voters in the whole precinct. Hello? Something wrong there. Could that be why the Democrats are storming the GOP headquarters? And that's not all. Here's a story from an independent talk show reporter, researcher named Thom Hartmann of New England. And I'm quoting his story, titled, "Evidence Mounts That the Vote May Have Been Hacked." Thom Hartmann, not William Wagener saying this. All right, I'm going to read a story, or part of it. When I spoke to Jeff Fisher this morning, that's Saturday, November 6, 2004, the Democratic candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives from Florida's 16th District said he was waiting for the FBI to show up. Fisher has evidence, he says, not only that Florida election was hacked, but of who hacked it and how. And now, not just this year, he said, but that these same people had previously hacked the Democratic primary race in 2002 so that Jeb Bush would not have to run against Janet Reno, who presented a real threat to Jeb, but instead against Bill McBride, who Jeb beat. Quote, "It was practice for a national effort," unquote, Fisher told Thom Hartmann. And some believe evidence is accumulating that the national effort happened on November 2nd, 2004. The state of Florida, for example, publishes a county-by-county record of votes cast and people registered to vote by party affiliation. Net denizen Kathy Dopp compiled the official state information into a table. I urge you to go look at this table. Go study it if you care about whether or not the election was hacked and stolen by those favoring George W. Bush. It's available at http:// or you could probably go to Google and just put www.ustogether.org/Florida_election.htm. And notice something startling. While all of this may or may not be evidence of vote tampering, it again brings back the nation to the question of why several states using electronic voting machines or scanners programmed by private, for-profit corporations and often connected to modems produce votes inconsistent with exit polls. Now I'm going to cut to the chase here. Dick Morris is saying, you know who Dick Morris is, he's that former Clinton guy who turned Republican political consultant, quite famous for being in bed with a prostitute and talking to President Clinton while he was in bed with a prostitute in a hotel. That's why I don't like this guy. But anyway, I have to agree with the statement. They eliminated two major potential fallacies in the survey research by separating actual voters from those who pretend they will cast votes but never do, and by substituting actual observation for guesswork in judging the relative turnout of different parts of the state. I.e., quote, exit polls are almost never wrong, Morris wrote. Goes on to say that Tina Brown, I think it was Tina Brown, was sitting down telling Bush that he had lost the election. It had been a landslide for Senator Kerry. Except that's not what was reported. Up in Seattle, they demonstrated on TV how easy it is for a person of average intelligence to use the Microsoft Windows, go in and change the vote total. Now, these tabulating machines in most states are simply your Microsoft Windows PC, that's all. Nothing particularly great about this system. Down in Florida, they had several counties that were widely pro-Democrat, and yet they voted for Bush. Not only that, in some counties in this past election, more people voted from some precincts than were registered to vote in those precincts. And I don't mean by 3 or 4. I mean by several hundreds, including thousands. And I go back to this Columbus, Ohio, precinct 1B. Thousands of votes cast when there's only 600 registered voters in that precinct, and yet they get thousands of votes for Bush? Something smells here, people, and it's not my deodorant. Anyway, you can get Hartman at www.thomhartman.com. Go read the story. It's there. It's worth reading. I'm not going to tell you all of this, but just for example, in Baker County, Florida, for example, with 12,887 registered voters, 69% of them Democrats, only 24% of them Republicans, the vote was 2,180 for Kerry and 7,738 for Bush. The opposite of what is seen everywhere else in the country, where registered Democrats largely vote for Democrat Senator John Kerry. Something stinks here, people. Now, I'm not a Democrat, but I believe in the integrity of the electoral system. It's got to be maintained, and it's not. It's not being maintained. In fact, I appointed myself as Libertarian Party chairman for Santa Barbara County. I appointed myself as alternate watcher for this last election, and I appointed Jeff Wynn for Lompoc and Clarence Gardner for Santa Barbara, Joe Fursanetti for Santa Maria. But I went down to Santa Maria as an alternate at 11 o'clock, and I found in the back room, in a room with a 5-pin lock on the door that I was not allowed to go through, they were counting the last 2 precincts, and Measure W wasn't done being counted yet. But back behind a locked door where I wasn't allowed to go, they were counting the votes. Wednesday, November 3rd, I filed a written letter of complaint to Mr. Holland and Bob Smith in Santa Barbara. So, I hope you watch my show here on Channel 22. I hope you watch it on Channel 26. And wherever you are in the country, whatever channel you are watching, keep watching On Second Thought, because we're going to bring you some new thoughts. One of the scariest things is the lack of freedom of speech. That's what public access was designed to do, provide political free speech for voices that are otherwise squelched. And here on Channel 26, TAP TV in Santa Maria, in a brand new studio where they blew a pile of money doing a very poor job to create a studio, got marvelous equipment, but they spent way too much on remodeling the building, but that's a different issue. My issue I want to talk about is my show was airing, it used to be I had to air it 8 times a week so I wouldn't sue for multiple violations. Now they're violating that agreement and they cut me down to 4, and then they reduced my show to only 2 times a week on Channel 26, Friday and Saturday, starting about 7:30 p.m. Friday and Saturday on Channel 26, besides the times it runs here on Channel 22. That's a violation of freedom of speech. So they're saying, oh, it's just policy. Well, I guess it'll take a federal lawsuit to give them a wake-up call. But I'm not the only person that's upset about the way the Santa Maria City Council, and especially that sneaky, snaky type creature, some people refer to Tim Ness, the city manager, but of course I would never call him a sneaky person. I would never go into city council and accuse Tim Ness of having a sexual adulterous affair with my wife. And I'm not saying that anybody else did, but maybe somebody did in the summer of '03. Anyway, the Lompoc people are really concerned that they're going to get shafted just like the Santa Maria producers have been shafted down to only 2 show airings a week. So I'm going to take a minute and we're going to go talk to Jeff Wynn a producer of Some Time in Lompoc. We'll go to that right now. Be back in a little bit.
Hello, my name is Jeff Wynn, and behind me you see Timmy, the Loch Ness manager. He's the city manager. Ness is Tim Ness of Santa Maria. He, along with the City Council of Santa Maria and the Mayor of Santa Maria, are doing something highly irregular and wrong. To give you an example, if you're having dinner one night and the city manager, Ness, walked into your house and put your TV on a certain channel or put a tape in your VCR and told you to watch that, would you have a problem with that? Would you have the problem with the Mayor of Santa Maria coming into your house anytime he wanted to, changing the channel on your TV and telling you what you will watch? Well, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what they're doing right now. The public access, the newly formed TAP group in Santa Maria are being bullied, for lack of a better word, by Tim Ness, the city manager of Santa Maria, the Mayor of Santa Maria, and the City Council. They are dictating to the public access channel in Santa Maria and soon to be Lompoc what you can watch, when you can watch it, and how many times you get to watch it. Now, this is a clear violation of the Freedom of Speech Act that is in our Constitution, and unless I woke up in Cuba this morning, I believe they're way overstepping their elected duties as city officials. And I'll tell you one thing, Lompoc, Mayor Dick Dewey, City Council, and Lompoc, Santa Maria is breaking their agreement to be partners with you. They are disregarding, Santa Maria is disregarding the partnership, the Santa Maria City Council, Ness, and the Mayor of Santa Maria. They're disregarding their own agreement. They said that they were going to establish a TAP board consisting of 4 and eventually 5 members that were going to establish policies and procedures. Now, the Mayor of Santa Maria and the city manager, Mr. Ness, have disregarded their own agreement and are now dictating policy to Mr. Miller, who is supposed to be running the whole thing, but he gets a phone call. Hello? The mayor says to Miller, you're going to cut the airings from 4 to 2. Okay? There's no TAP discussion. There was no TAP meeting where the public could have some input on establishing this new policy. This is a dictatorial system right now, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're a veteran, if you fought for your country, you fought for the freedom of speech, you should be mad as hell. And you should call the city of Santa Maria right now. You should get, as soon as this program's over, call Mr. Ness and tell him, hey, step off of public access. Because right now, Santa Maria has got their foot on the neck of public access in Santa Maria and soon to be Lompoc. And I'll tell you what, as soon as the TAP people in Santa Maria come into Lompoc and take over Lompoc, if they don't change their tune, I'm going to personally lead a protest in front of Santa Maria City Hall saying that this is not what we agreed to, this is not public access, this is city dictatorship over the public access. And ladies and gentlemen, if they can do this to one show, they can do this to every show. A great show, SOS, Stop Our Silence, was airing 4 times a week on the newly formed TAP channels. Now they've cut SOS down to twice a week. Now this is a family violence prevention show, Stop Our Silence. Now, what's next? And then cut down a police beat down to from 4 to 2 times, Red Cross from 4 to 2 times. And this is not out of need, ladies and gentlemen. This is an arbitrary decision that's being made in a smoke-filled room in the Santa Maria City Council chambers in the back. Ness and the mayor are telling you how much you get to watch, when you can watch, and what your freedom of speech will be. You know, I can't go on. This is it. BJ, I'm getting too angry. I'm just going to leave the set right now, and I'm going to go call my congressman. Thank you.
Wow, I don't think I've ever seen television producer Jeff Wynn from Lompoc, California that angry. Clearly, Mr. Wynn perceives the danger, and I want to tell you, that was an unsolicited comment by him. None of that was rehearsed. None of that was rehearsed. I didn't give him the words. That's Jeff Wynn. He does his own show called Freak Out, and he's really upset. And he makes a valid point. We have lots of empty time. You just go check in the morning or late at night. You'll see nothing on channel 22 or 26. And yet these idiots, and I'm talking about the Loch Ness Monster, and that cartoon character was labeled Timmy, you know, the city manager down there, who is to me one of the worst city managers I have ever seen anywhere. But the problem is the people you just re-elected, the incumbents in Santa Maria, these people don't know a feather in their butt from a snake in the grass. They got their head so far up their anal orifices, they don't know what it is they're kissing. You know, and so they have to depend on Tim Ness. And he's, you know, this is not a person of high moral statures, in my personal opinion. That's right, sticking feathers up your butt does not make you a chicken. Oh, gosh. Thank you, Adam, for that unsolicited comment. But you know what? Recall our city council may have second life once the federal lawsuit is filed against the parties that are interfering with freedom of speech, which turns out it goes back to the Santa Maria City Council from going back 4 years. And a lot of, I don't gripe about this. A lot of people don't know. I spent 7 years to get this show started while the city council violated the law repeatedly over and over, and Comcast cooperated with that violation of federal FCC regulations and their own contract with Comcast. They just violated the law. Now what's going to happen here is we're going to have to file a federal lawsuit. The city will farm the lawsuit out to a private attorney who will then make more money off of you taxpayers who re-elected these incompetents that we have occupying City Hall, because they recall, right, that's where we're going to have to go with this. So I appreciate Jeff Wynn, his comments down there in Lompoc, California. He doesn't appear on my show very often. He likes to do a comical, satirical type show, and he's not generally a serious type person, but he was on this issue. I don't think these people in the city council and that Loch Ness Timmy monster understand the trouble they're stirring up for themselves. But hey, I'm a mild-mannered guy. I never stir up any trouble. Just William Wagner's thought. Anyway, I forgot to mention, among the many libertarians that got reelected is Kate O'Brien. Now, some of you that have watched my show faithfully for the last 4 years will remember I had Kate O'Brien on my show. She won by just 3 votes over the son of a political hack down in Simi Valley in Ventura County. She's elected to the Simi Valley Parks and Recreation District. It's an elected position, pays a small salary, a really small salary. But this time, she ran for re-election, and looky here, people, Kate O'Brien came in on the top of the list. That's the Libertarian, the only one down there on the Simi Valley Parks and Recreation. And there's Kate O'Brien, 26,000 votes, 932, 32.8%. She's 6,000 votes ahead of her nearest competitor. This is the Libertarian being re-elected. Why was she re-elected? Well, I don't know. I can tell you that this gal that came in 4th there, take a look down that list again. Look down on the 4th list. There's a gal named Marcy Kraft. See that down there on the list? Yeah, down on there. Marcy Kraft only pulled 9,000 votes. Well, Marcy didn't get elected. I believe it was only the top 3 got elected. Marcy failed, or maybe it was the top 2. Marcy was going around criticizing the Libertarian Kate O'Brien because Kate O'Brien opposed increasing taxes on the taxpayers. And Kate O'Brien opposed accepting state and federal grants, people. Hello? Yeah. She opposed taking these grants because that's just your federal tax money. Well, the people of Simi Valley Parks and Recreation, those voters, re-elected her by a landslide. First time, she just squeaked in with 3 votes, so there was a recount. This time, she won by a landslide. People, electing Libertarians is a good thing. It's a really good thing. Too bad Michael Badnarik didn't win, and the Honorable James Gray, sitting Orange County judge. Really a shame that you didn't elect him, though he did very well, considering Barbara Boxer had 25 million of your lobbyist tax dollars. See, it doesn't matter what you think or you vote. Barbara Boxer doesn't come around and ask you what you thought. She even declined to come on this show. I offered her free time. She's not coming here because she can't take the heat of being asked specific questions on why she voted for the terrible, unconstitutional Patriot Act bill. Anyway, getting back to Judge Jim Gray. He's the guy, you'll recall, that says this is a sitting judge of 22 years on the bench saying the drug war has failed. He used to be a drug war. Now he knows it's wrong. Well, now I'm going to give you a chief of police who says the drug war has failed. It's wrong. We ought to end the drug war. It's over. It's bad. But I'm not going to give you just a short clip because I'm not going to let you listen to a long clip. This is retired chief of police from Florida, Jerry Cameron, in Florida. Go to that. Here with Jerry Cameron, a former chief of police from a city in Florida. Good morning, Jerry.
Good morning.
What cities have you been a police officer in and chief of police in?
Well, I started my law enforcement career in Columbia, South Carolina, and I served as a constable and a deputy sheriff in that city. Then later took a position as the chief of police in Irmo, South Carolina, and was chief there for 4 years. Then took a position in Fernandina Beach, Florida, where I was chief for 7 years.
And when did you retire?
I retired in 91.
91. When you retired in 91, had your feelings about the drug war changed at all?
Oh, absolutely. I began to question the efficacy of it even before that, and as I started to research it, it became very apparent to me that that was a war that we were not succeeding in. After I left law enforcement, I went to work teaching drug interdiction out of the University of North Florida. That just sort of sealed the deal as I went around the country looking at various enforcement programs and did even more research on it and became convinced that I really wasn't even comfortable teaching police officers tactics of drug interdiction.
So you taught police officer tactics for interdiction of drugs?
That's correct.
And that was with what city in Tallahassee?
Well, no, that was the University of North Florida is out of Jacksonville. They actually flew me around the country, so I spent a good bit of time in Illinois and Maine and Connecticut and other states as well.
And while you're teaching it, you began to doubt whether this drug war was working. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you when you taught these seminars, you would come in with some of the folks that had been in the federal system and some of the people in the highest echelons. And when you started comparing notes, it became obvious that there were not only pragmatic problems with the war on drugs, but there were some real moral issues.
What were the pragmatic issues that you encountered?
Well, we set out to believe that we were going to be able to take drug dealers off of the street. We were going to be able to reduce the supply of drugs. We were going to be able to stop violence, or at least dramatically reduce it. And as a result of that, I determined that we hadn't accomplished any of those goals. In fact, we had aggravated the situation.
So by trying to take drugs off the street, you're saying you actually increased the flow?
Absolutely, because what we did is we created an artificial profit that would not be there in a free market situation, and that profit was so gigantic that there would always be someone willing to step up and take the risk, no matter how many people you put in jail.
And in taking that risk, did some of these drug peddlers, couriers, did they shoot police officers?
Yes, we had, particularly when we got very aggressive in interdiction on the interstates and places like that, we began to lose police officers, and it's certainly easy to understand with the real punishing law that you had, this low-level courier, and that's all you would ever get on the interstates. You'd never get a key person. But he had to make a decision. Was he going to spend a long time in jail, or was he going to take the life of a police officer?
and once in a while they took the life of a police officer.
More than we like to talk about.
How many police officers would you guesstimate in your time in the police work, which spans a couple of decades, how many police officers lost their lives due to this drug war issue?
I really haven't followed the statistics on it. I know that we had a lot of high-profile deaths in Florida. In fact, the #1 state trooper on I-95 lost his life doing a drug interdiction stop. There were many shootouts in Miami, and police officers lost their lives. Then there are police officers that lose their lives that you never really know why they lost their life, just that they were killed, and drugs are at the root of a lot of those. A classic example was a constable in Texas made a stop and was killed with his own weapon, and we would have never known why he was killed with his own weapon and what happened, except that he had left the video camera on in the car, and we found that he had discovered using interrogation techniques that they were carrying drugs in the trunk, and when he went to inspect the drugs, they jumped him and took his weapon and killed him.
Wow. At what point in time did you change and decided even my political affiliation is not helping the situation? You decided to join the Libertarian Party. When did that crystallize in your mind?
Well, I've been philosophically a libertarian for a long time, but I have suffered under the delusion that a lot of people that are philosophical libertarians that are in the Republican Party suffer under, that the Republican Party basically stands for the same principles as the libertarians, but that we just need to reform the party. And I became completely frustrated with that process and convinced that you would never reform the Republican Party.
Never.
It was the status quo defense mechanisms are just too great.
So what year was that crystallized in your mind?
That was this year. This was in January. I'm a recovering Republican, and I've been rational for 147 days now.
When you made that decision, how did your wife and your friends feel about it? Did they know that you were switching parties?
Well, my wife knows the agony that I've gone through over several years about what was going on with the Republican Party, and the fact that you couldn't get any traction as to changing things or reforming that party. And so it was actually, I think, a sense of relief to her, because I was a much happier person after I made that decision. And matter of fact, I could shave in the morning without wondering about what I stood for.
How about your friends in police work? You must belong to a retired police officers association. Did they ever ask you, what are you doing?
Every single peer that I have agrees with me privately that the war is, agreement ranges from that the war is lost, you never win it, all the way to a vast majority just agree that we ought to be out of it and never should have been in it.
How many people of your peers would you say? Is that 20, 25?
Every chief that I engage in any conversation for any length of time shares that same thing. They just can't do it publicly.
Did you ever meet the former chief of Gary, Indiana, who said this 25 years ago, that we ought to end the drug war?
Yes, I did actually meet the chief from Indiana, and he was considered a nut at the time because of that position.
And what do you think of the nut now?
He was a prophet.
Well, it's very interesting how nuts become prophets.
It really is.
And when you find people who know enough about the issue, they come out the same way you did. What would you recommend for people who are still in the Republican Party, still, hemming and hawing, thinking, I don't want to waste my vote? What would you say to them?
Well, first off, wasting your vote is to continue to do the same thing that you've always done that gets a bad result. Even Einstein said that the very definition of insanity is to continue to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. Every election cycle, we elect either a Democrat or a Republican. And every election cycle, things get worse. And for us, the voters, us, the citizens of this country, if we want to change, what we have to do is we have to change. We have to change what we're doing and how we're voting.
And what are you personally going to do this election cycle? What are you doing to make that change?
I am giving people an honest choice. I'm sticking with the issues that actually affect them. It's very difficult to go and talk to people about the Liberty Tree and to get any attention from them. But what you can do is you can talk about the fruits of liberty, and they do want to talk about that. And when you talk about the fruits of liberty to the average American, it sounds good.
So you're running as a candidate for what district and what state?
House District 20 in the state of Florida.
And you're running as a Republican, Democrat, or Libertarian?
I'm running as a Libertarian.
Are you going to stick with the Libertarian Party?
I'm a Libertarian for life.
Well, there you had it, people. My interview with retired Chief of Police Jerry Cameron, a very establishment-looking man. He's a recovering Republican, now a Libertarian for life, he says. You heard him? I didn't put any words in his mouth. Those were his own unrehearsed interview. A Chief of Police saying, end the drug war, we're making things worse. That's just what Honorable James P. Gray, who you've seen on my show for almost a month prior to this, Orange County judge saying, end the drug war. The reason they don't is because too many cops, too many sheriffs make lots of extra money in federal grants, and it creates more victims that need help, that go on welfare because their husband or their wife is now in prison. And the thing is a disaster. Libertarians are not asking people to everybody go out and do illegal drugs. We're just saying the drug war is making it worse. And I'm not going to bring up little Alberta Sepulveda, murdered, in my opinion, by Officer Hahn in Modesto when they shot the little 11-year-old Latino boy in the back, laying face down on his bedroom floor. That's part of the drug war. You kill little kids. Well, there's a recovering Republican, Jerry Cameron. Now, I want to go back to him and let you hear a little bit more of the interview with retired police chief Jerry Cameron. This year became a Libertarian candidate in the 20th Assembly District of Florida. How do the people that you work with in law enforcement, sheriff's deputy, DEA agents, FBI, how do they respond to you now, privately or publicly?
Well, of course, I don't have as much contact as I once had, but the ones that I see on a frequent basis in any way whatsoever are very, very much in agreement that this war on drugs is not going anywhere. It's lost. It was lost a long time ago, even before it was started. They still have, some of them, they still have a commitment to the war on drugs, and some of them a very strong commitment because it's the way you fund the department. And they publicly say one thing, and then privately to me, they will say another.
Is this part of the reason why more and more police officers and sheriff's deputies are getting arrested themselves for selling drugs illegally?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you don't. When I started in the war on drugs, we were approaching it as from a moral perspective. We thought we were doing society good. When you learn that what you're doing is a sham and you keep doing it, you become a criminal yourself. And these people that become criminals themselves, they don't see anything wrong with taking the drug dealer's money or selling drugs. I've got the sheriff of the county that I was a chief in is now serving, I think, 18 years in the federal penitentiary, and he was actually taking seized drugs from one department and selling them in his jurisdiction.
What was his name?
Laurie Ellis.
And did he plea bargain or did he go to trial?
No, he went to trial.
And a jury of 6 or 12?
I've forgotten the details of the trial. He went shortly after I was out of law enforcement. But,
okay, so that would have been about 1993,
yes.
About 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think his trial was in '93.
So he's still got about 9-10 years to
Yes.
serve before he gets out. Do you think he's going to have a future in law enforcement anymore after this?
Oh, absolutely not.
Do you think he might become a libertarian?
No, I don't believe he'll become a libertarian.
Okay. This is a problem. We see this in virtually every state where the police officers, sheriffs are getting arrested. Who usually arrests them?
It's generally the federal government that ends up arresting them, and that certainly leaves the question, who's arresting the federal agents that go bad, but...
Yes, it certainly does. Have you talked to anybody that has explained how the CIA has an interest in the worldwide heroin trafficking?
Yes, I have, as a matter of fact.
And what can you tell us about that?
Well, and I wish that I had remembered the gentleman's name. He was a DEA agent that only worked on a certain type of case. And in fact, in his whole career, he had only worked on 3 cases. And one of those cases, he said, led to the presidential palace in Colombia. And the State Department stepped in and said, end of the investigation. That's national interest. And that case took about 7 years. And then he started a new case that led to the steps of the Attorney General's office in Mexico. And the State Department stepped in and said national interest. And finally, the final case that he was involved in was in the Bermuda Triangle. And there was a group of guerrillas up in the mountains that were responsible for approximately 1/3 of the heroin, according to him, that was hitting the streets in the U.S. And they had actually killed one of our DEA agents, and they were tracked right up to this group, and the State Department stepped in and they said, well, what can possibly be the national interest with guerrillas that are selling heroin? And they said they're against communism.
Is this a little discouraging to you as a peace officer?
Well, certainly. From that point on, I could never, with any enthusiasm, tell a guy that was making $30,000 a year and had 2 kids and a wife at home to go out at 4 o'clock in the morning and stop some guy and use tools that I'd given him to put that guy in a position where he had to make a decision and lose his wife over it, and his family lose the husband and father. It certainly discouraged me from wanting to continue in any way in dealing with the war on drugs, because it isn't really a war.
So the issue appears from what you know from firsthand discussions with a drug enforcement agent who only worked 3 cases, is that when you track it down to the high level in the Colombian Palace or Mexico or Bermuda Triangle, is that the United States State Department steps in and says, stop investigating.
That's correct.
Does that impugn the integrity of the United States presidency?
Well, I think that, among some other things, has impugned the integrity of the United States presidency.
So basically, what we're saying here, it appears like you're saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth, they would say like, we hire FBI, DEA agents, we send young police officers to get killed in the line of duty, and then the president holds memorials for them and says, so sad, too bad, but yet the presidency stops the investigation. When it gets close enough, they may actually arrest somebody who'll point the finger right back to maybe the U.S. presidency.
Well, of course, this agent didn't use the word president, he used
State Department. What?
And that's the only knowledge I have is what was relayed to me.
Right. Do you want to identify that DEA agent?
I wish I could, actually. I'd love to talk with him today, because I had decided that I was going to be out of public life altogether at that point, and it really just didn't stick with me.
On another issue, there's a war on the family, a war on fathers in particular. It appears from the evidence I've gathered that a man can be arrested when he doesn't even know there's a warrant out for him for failure to pay child support, or he can be stopped, restrained from going home, restrained from trying to make reconciliation with a wife he didn't know had filed divorce papers. Is that a common practice?
Absolutely, happens all the time.
Is it due process?
I don't believe so. I believe it's a Fifth Amendment violation.
Can you describe any cases where you had to arrest a man who he wasn't attacking anybody, he wasn't violating anybody's property rights, yet he was arrested and sent somewhere to jail?
I remember one case in particular that I think is just an archetypical example of what we're talking about. And this was, I was working the extradition unit at a sheriff's department in Columbia, South Carolina. And I was ordered to pick up a guy that had been extradited from Atlanta, Georgia. And he had to go before family court. I picked him up, drove him from the jail to the courthouse, which was some distance away, and engaged him in conversation about how this had come about. He was actually working for UPS at the time here in Atlanta. He had left the Columbia area because he couldn't afford to be in the area where his wife was at, because they continually got into heated arguments and problems that she, according to him, was provoking. And so he moved and got a good job in Atlanta and child support until he found that she was involved with drugs and had a boyfriend and was spending the money on both. And he quit sending the checks to her, and he was picked up here in Atlanta and went through an extradition process, which for non-payment is a pretty streamlined process. And I picked him up and I carried him in to the judge, and I gave him some bad encouragement on the way in. I said, well, you know, probably all you're going to have to do is convince the judge that you will start paying the payments again, and you'll catch up what's back, and they'll let you out. And when I was sitting there with him, and the judge handed down his order, which was that he was to, before he could get out of jail, to pay 100% of the back child support, several $1,000s in court cost, and to post a bond for 6 months future child support before he could get out of jail. And he was stunned and I was stunned. It was one of the more egregious cases that I've seen.
Well, what do you think of that? Now you've got a chief of police telling you how women who steal their children's child support spend it on their new boyfriends and drugs, illegal drugs. Well, that was from retired chief of police Jerry Cameron, a reformed, recovering Republican who's now a libertarian. He was not the only chief of police. I have done interviews that say they know, sadly, that the courts support these women continuing to get child support, even they know these women are spending the money on new boyfriends' clothes, and illegal drugs. But you see, that's not really the issue. The whole issue is to get the money out of the father's pocket, reduce the dad to a slave, to a virtual slave, so that they can destroy the family. And the divorce industry makes lots of money doing it. And the courts hire more court reporters, and they get more guardian ad litems and more CPS caseworkers, all to destroy the family. Is that what you want? That's what's happening. CBS and NBC actually went out of their way to not tell you Republican Congressman Ron Paul from the 14th District, I think 14th or 17th District of Texas. He's a baby doctor, Dr. Ron Paul. They know him in Congress as Dr. No, because he always votes no for all their spending boondoggle programs to waste your money. He was a Libertarian presidential candidate back in the 80s. Well, Dr. Ron Paul, Republican congressman from Texas, voted for Michael Badnarik, the Libertarian, and supported him openly. Not only him, but that flaming Republican Bob Barr, congressman from Georgia, I believe, also recommended people vote for Michael Badnarik, the Libertarian. Did any of the C media tell you that? CBS, NBC, or ABC, CNN? No, none of them told you this. You would think it'd be major news if a Democrat congressman said vote for Bush, one said vote for Kerry, but no, they're recommending the Libertarians because we're the only people that really want a limited government, a constitutionally civil rights respecting government. So I'm going to take you back to May in Atlanta, Georgia, where you will see Ron Paul, Republican congressman from Texas, at the Libertarian National Convention, wowing the 1,000 delegates there, and then follow that up with Nancy Neal introducing Congressman Bob Barr, and then James Bovard, an author of a great book. Here we go.
to the underground economy. Once you put a 30% tax on everything we buy and sell, everyone would pay it. It would be and it would be good. But that emphasis on knowing what we pay the government can come about by passing another piece of legislation I have, and that is to repeal the withholding law. Exactly what they're paying. Can you imagine how quickly it would end if everybody was required to write a check every 30 days on their taxes? That would end very quickly. Now my approach, which of course is idealistic, not likely to happen soon, and that is to pass the Liberty Amendment. The Liberty Amendment is simply repeal the 16th Amendment, get rid of the IRS, but it takes into consideration the problem of spending. It gives the U.S. government 3 years to cease and desist in doing everything that they are doing that is not explicitly permitted by the Constitution. You know, there are so many subjects I can go over, and time is limited, so I'm going to try to narrow it down to a few more items that I can at least briefly make a comment on, because I get a lot of questions about 9/11. And I've not had any serious criticism, even in Texas, even in a conservative part of Texas next to where George Bush lives. I've just had essentially no serious criticism, and big rallies turn out in support of my position on not having passed that Patriot Act. And what would you do? I mean, what would you do? I mean, what are you going to do with the terrorists? Well, first, of course, we ought to understand why they are attacking us. A lot of people use the cliche, they hate us, they're killing us, they want to kill us. So that means we have to go kill them. But they don't even go kill the right people, is the whole problem. But my solution, my partial solution, because there's no total solution, but one step in the right direction on the problems that we faced on 9/11 would be to legalize the Second Amendment. You know, they put a lot of emphasis on weapons of mass destruction. They found a shell the other day with traces of sarin that was built.
Well, there you had it, people. Republican Congressman Ron Paul, the baby doctor from Texas, who's now a Republican, but he's really a Libertarian, at the Libertarian National Convention, and none of the major media showed you any of that. Nothing. Now I'm going to take you to Nancy Neal, who's going to introduce Bob Barr, the Georgia Republican Congressman. Nancy Neal.
You're welcome. Thank you all for coming. I said I threw this party and invited a bunch of people and y'all came.
Thank you. It's great to be with you all here. I really appreciate the invitation to do two things that have a great deal of meaning. One is to just share some ideas with true libertarians, which I appreciate very much. And secondly, to introduce my very good friend and a great friend of all of us who believe in the Constitution and the underpinnings thereof, which is the right to privacy, James Bogart, from whom we'll hear some very, very interesting thoughts and remarks in just a few minutes. Somebody was asking me as we were waiting for the lunch to open up, what I was doing these days, and I'm doing quite a number of things, the least important of which is not. I am a host of a radio show, and it's just a once-a-week radio show. The title of it, reflecting the usual modesty that I bring to all of my endeavors, is entitled Bob Barr's Laws of the Universe. And we have a little bit of fun with this. I don't know whether you picked it up, James. James has actually been on the radio show. I had the opportunity late last year to review his most recent book, which I do hope you all have and certainly have read, Terrorism and Tyranny by James Bovard, and we talked about that. The radio show, what we do on the radio show is carried on the Radio America Network. It's picked up here in Atlanta on 1190 AM, which is WGKA, on Sunday evenings from 6 to 8, and then it's picked up around the country on various stations during the same time slot, or maybe they delay or whatnot. And what we do, I think you find very interesting. What we take are very, very important substantive topics, including many of those that you all deal with here at this convention and at your local meetings and in the writings and educational efforts that as libertarians you all engage in. Issues regarding privacy and federal government, regulatory matters, and personal freedom and so forth. And we sort of overlay on top of that a little bit of humor, which I think is very, very important in this day. If you didn't have a little bit of humor when you look at what Washington is doing, you'd either go crazy or kill yourself, I suppose. I mean, it's just so distressing with what's going on in Washington. It seems that each party sort of trips over itself trying to get in first place to see which party understands less about the Constitution than the other one.
Well, that was Bob Barr, Congressman at the Libertarian National Convention. Isn't Bob Barr a Republican, endorsing the Libertarian? Well, this is William Wagener saying, take back America, people. Vote Libertarian, register Libertarian.
He has erected a multitude of new offices and has sent hither swarms of officials to harass our people and eat out their substance.
Keep watching on Second Thought.